The last message my mother ever sent me was not long. It arrived at 7:42 on a Thursday morning while I was standing in my Chicago studio, choosing fabric samples for a hotel renovation that would later change my life. The message said, "Do not call or come here anymore. We are done. And do not even dream about the will, sweetheart." Sweetheart. That word was the cruelest part. My mother, Linda Hayes, knew how to lace poison with sugar. For 36 seconds, I stared at the screen. I waited for my body to do what it always did. Panic, explain, call, apologize for whatever invisible crime I had committed this time. But nothing came. No begging, no shaking, no desperate desire to run back to Tulsa and prove I was a good daughter. Just a calm so deep it frightened me. I typed 2 words. Got it? Then I turned off every payment I had been making for them. My mother's medical bills, my father's restaurant supplier invoices, my brother Brandon's business loans, the equipment lease I had quietly covered for the Hayes family kitchens. One by one, I closed the doors they had never thanked me for keeping open. My name is Susanna Hayes. Most people call me Susan. I am an interior designer. And for 5 years, I was the daughter my family mocked in public and used in private. The morning they finally told me I was no longer family, I gave them exactly what they asked for. My absence. To understand why 2 words destroyed the Hayes family, you have to understand what our name meant in Tulsa. Hayes did not mean warmth. It meant discipline, restaurants, legacy, control. My father, Stephen Hayes, built his first diner with borrowed money, 16-hour days, and a belief that love was best expressed through obedience. By the time I was 12, he owned 3 restaurants. By the time I was 20, he owned 7. The local paper called him a self-made success. Church friends called him a family man. Employees called him Sir. At home, we called him whatever would not make him angry. My father believed every person in the family had a function. My mother maintained appearances. My brother Brandon inherited greatness. And I was supposed to be useful. Useful meant smiling when guests praised Brandon for ideas I had drawn. Useful meant helping with menus, interiors, signage, and staff uniforms, then listening while my father said design was a hobby for people who did not understand real work. Useful meant never asking why the son who crashed every opportunity was called the future, while the daughter who saved every emergency was called dramatic. My mother called it balance. I called it being trained to accept less and still give more. Brandon was the golden son before he had ever earned gold. How was loud, handsome, charming in the shallow way that worked best on people who did not have to rely on him. If Brandon failed a class, the teacher had not understood his potential. If Brandon lost money, the market had shifted. If Brandon lied, he was under pressure. If I succeeded, I was lucky. I learned early that success did not protect me from contempt. When I won a state design scholarship at 17, my father said, "That is nice, but restaurants are not built on pretty colors." When I left for Chicago to study interior architecture, he told relatives I was going through a creative phase. When I landed my first luxury hospitality client, Brandon told me rich people would pay for anything if you used enough fancy words. I laughed then, not because it was funny, because laughing was easier than admitting my family could only respect achievement when it belonged to my brother. For years, I tried to earn a seat at their table by becoming undeniable. I built a design firm in Chicago. I hired staff. I won awards. I renovated boutique hotels, farm-to-table restaurants. and private clubs that my father would have envied if someone else had designed them. Still, every Thanksgiving, I was asked whether I had found a real direction yet. And every year, I answered politely, because some daughters confuse politeness with hope. The first time my family asked for money, my mother was sick. She needed treatment in Dallas, and insurance would not cover all the travel, specialists, and medication gaps. My father called at midnight. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. "Susan," he said, "your mother needs help." That was all it took. I paid flights, hotels, medical balances, specialist invoices. I told myself this was family. I told myself love does not keep score when someone is scared. And that was true. But what I did not understand yet was that my family absolutely kept score. They simply counted only what I owed them, never what I gave. After my mother recovered, nobody mentioned the bills. Not really. She sent a text that said, "Thank you, honey." My father said, "We appreciate it." Then, 2 weeks later, at a family dinner, he told one of his friends, "Susan's design thing keeps her busy, but Brandon is the one who understands legacy." I sat across the table, smiling with a mouthful of ashes. That night, I cried in my rental car behind the restaurant. Then I wiped my face, drove back to the hotel, and paid another pharmacy invoice before bed. That was how it began. After medical bills came Brandon's first collapse. He had opened a craft burger concept with exposed brick, overpriced bourbon, and no understanding of food cost. 6 months later, he owed suppliers, 2 cooks had quit, and he was one payroll away from public embarrassment. My father called it a temporary cash flow issue. My mother called it a family emergency. Brandon called it bad luck. I called it $30,000. That was what I transferred to keep his failure from becoming a scandal. I wired the money from Chicago while sitting on the floor of a hotel suite I had designed. A magazine editor was photographing the lobby downstairs. My phone buzzed with praise from clients. And still, I felt like the little girl waiting for my father to say he was proud. Brandon called me once after the transfer. "Thanks, Susie," he said. "I knew you had some cash sitting around." Some cash. As if money appeared in my account because design fairies liked me. As if every dollar did not come from contracts, travel, client revisions, payroll stress, and nights when I slept under my desk because a project deadline mattered. I wanted to tell him that. Instead, I said, "Just get stable." I did not, but he did get louder. My father's restaurants began aging in ways he refused to see. The carpets looked tired, the lighting was harsh, the menus were too heavy. The younger crowd wanted sustainable materials, local sourcing, flexible seating, and restaurants that felt alive rather than preserved. I built a proposal for him, not because he asked, because I still believed some part of him wanted the business to survive more than he wanted to be right. I spent 3 weeks on it. Sustainable redesign, energy-efficient kitchens, supplier transparency, new brand architecture, updated interiors that honored the original Hayes history without trapping it in dust. I flew to Tulsa and presented it in his office. My father listened for 10 minutes. Then he closed the folder. "This is fantasy," he said. Brandon smirked from the leather chair near the window. My mother looked down at her hands. I said, "It is based on market research." My father waved that away. "You design hotel lobbies. Do not lecture me about restaurants." I should have stood up then. I should have taken my folder and my dignity and left. Instead, when the walk-in freezer failed 2 months later, I paid for the replacement equipment. Some lessons take longer to learn when you are desperate to be loved. For 5 years, I became the invisible support beam of the Hayes family. Not the heir, not the pride, not the legacy. The beam. The thing everyone leans on while pretending the building stands by itself. I paid supplier balances when vendors threatened to stop deliveries. I covered loan payments Brandon forgot. I sent money for my mother's follow-up care. I bought equipment my father said he had handled. And still, in public, they called me distant. At a charity dinner in Tulsa, my father introduced Brandon as the future of Hayes Dining. Then he introduced me as our creative one from Chicago. Our creative one. Not the woman who had paid the invoice that allowed the kitchen behind him to reopen. Not the person who had quietly saved his reputation 3 times that year. Just creative. A decorative branch on the family tree. That night, Brandon got drunk and joked that if design ever failed, I could come home and pick paint colors for the ladies' restroom. Everyone laughed, even my mother. I excused myself, went to the bathroom, and transferred another $12,000 to cover a supplier lawsuit my father had not told the room about. Then I washed my hands and returned to the table. The message from my mother came after a disagreement about Brandon. He had failed again. This time, it was a food hall concept attached to one of my father's older locations. I had overspent, underreported, and blamed everyone from staff to weather. My father asked me to bridge a gap. A gap! That was what they called it when Brandon dug a hole. I asked for financial statements. My father went silent. Brandon shouted in the background. Forget it. She always needs to act superior. I said, if you want my money, I need documents. My mother got on the phone. Her voice was thin and sharp. Your brother is family. So am I said. There was a silence so cold it felt like a door opening in winter. Then she said, sometimes I wonder if Chicago made you hard. I almost apologized. The old reflex rose in my throat. But I swallowed it. No, I said. Chicago taught me invoices have numbers. She hung up. The next morning, she sent the message that freed me. Do not call or come here anymore. We are done. And do not even dream about the will, sweetheart. I read it once. Then again. Then I laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound of a lock opening after years of pushing on the wrong door. The will. They truly believed I was hanging around for an inheritance. They believed the daughter paying their bills was waiting for a future handout from the people quietly taking from her present. So I wrote, got it? Then I opened my laptop. I canceled the automatic payment from my mother's medical travel account. I canceled the supplier payment tied to Hayes Dining. I stopped the standing transfer to Brandon's lender. I emailed the equipment leasing company and removed my card from the file. I sent my attorney the folder I should have sent years earlier. Then I sat still, waiting for guilt, waiting for panic, waiting for the old version of me to rise and undo everything. She did not come. Only silence did, and for the first time, silence felt like freedom. They noticed within 48 hours. My father called first. I did not answer. Then my mother, then Brandon, then my father again. Voicemails stacked up like unpaid bills. Susan, call me. Your mother is upset. There has been a misunderstanding. You cannot just stop payments without warning. Without warning. The woman told me not to call or come. Apparently, they meant emotionally, not financially. Brandon left the worst voicemail. You think you're powerful because you have money now? You are destroying this family. I listened to it twice. Then I saved it. Not because I needed it legally, because I needed proof for myself. Proof that when the money stopped, their love language became accusation. That week, I did not respond. I worked. I slept badly. I cried in the shower once because grief has a way of finding steam. But I did not reopen the pipeline. The first truth came from Tara, Brandon's wife. She called from a blocked number. At first, I almost declined. Then something told me to answer. "Susan," she whispered, "I need to tell you something before they blame it all on you." I sat down. Tara had always been quiet around the Hayes family. Not weak, observant. Now her voice shook with the exhaustion of someone who had carried a secret too long. She told me Brandon had been stealing from the restaurants. Not a little, not once. Thousands at a time. Cash withdrawals, fake vendor accounts, hidden credit lines, equipment deposits that never bought equipment. My father did not know the full amount. My mother suspected more than she admitted. And Brandon had been using some of my transfers to cover holes he created by stealing from the same company he claimed he would inherit. I closed my eyes. The room tilted. Not because I was surprised Brandon lied, because I realized I had been funding the cover-up of a man who mocked me. Tara said, "I'm leaving him." Then she sent me documents. Screenshots, bank records, invoices. The Golden Sun had been eating the foundation from inside. My father demanded a meeting the next week. I did not ask. Demanded? Old habits die slowly in men who built empires out of being obeyed. I agreed to meet at a cafe halfway between my hotel and the airport when I flew into Tulsa. Not at the family house. Not at one of the restaurants. Neutral ground. My ground. They arrived together. My father in a dark jacket. My mother pale and rigid. Brandon red-eyed, restless, and angry. For a moment, I saw us from outside. The perfect Hayes family. Cracked lacquer? My father sat down and said, "You have made your point." I looked at him calmly. I was not making a point. I was following instructions. My mother flinched. Brandon leaned forward. "You cut Mom off." I said, "Mom cut me off. I simply stopped paying to remain rejected." My father's jaw tightened. "This family is in trouble." I nodded. "Yes, but I am no longer the emergency fund for people who call me disposable." Then Brandon made the mistake of laughing. A short, ugly laugh. "Disposable? You've always loved playing victim." I opened my folder. The one Tara had helped me build. I placed copies of the fake vendor invoices on the table. Then screenshots of hidden accounts. Then proof that two of the supplier debts I paid had been created after Brandon redirected company funds. The cafe noise blurred around us. Brandon stopped laughing. My mother whispered, "Where did you get those?" I said, "From someone tired of lying for him." My father picked up one page. His hand shook slightly. For years, he had stared past my competence to worship Brandon's potential. Now potential had numbers. Stolen numbers. Brandon said, "She is trying to turn you against me." I almost smiled. "No, Brandon, your math did that." My father looked at me then. Not with love. Not yet. With the horror of a man realizing the daughter he dismissed had been the only one keeping his kingdom standing. My mother began to cry. I had expected that. Tears had always been her way of moving responsibility out of reach. "Susan," she said, "we are still your family." I looked at her. I wanted that sentence to mean something. I wanted it so badly that for 1 second, I was 12 again, waiting in a restaurant booth while everyone praised Brandon for remembering a recipe I had written down. But the want passed, and I stayed 38, Family is not a word you use after the money stops, I said. She sobbed harder. My father said nothing. Brandon muttered a curse. I continued. I paid your medical bills while you laughed when Dad called my career a hobby. I paid Brandon's debts while he insulted me at dinners. I paid restaurant invoices while Dad introduced him as the future. I did not do it because I wanted the will. I leaned forward. I did it because I thought if I became useful enough, one day you would love me without needing me. The words landed like broken glass. And for once, nobody swept them up. Then I told them my news. The design proposal my father had called fantasy had sold, not to him, not to Hayes Dining, to a national hospitality group that planned to use it as the foundation for a sustainable restaurant hotel concept across 8 cities. The licensing and consulting package was worth $1 million. My mother stopped crying. Brandon stared. My father looked like I had slapped him without moving. He said, "You sold our idea?" There it was. Our. The word appeared only when something I built became valuable. I said, "No, I sold my idea. You rejected it." My father's mouth tightened. That concept belonged in the family. I said, "So did I." The silence afterward was the loudest thing I had ever heard. For years, I thought confrontation would feel like fire. It did not. It felt like setting down a heavy bag I had forgotten I was carrying. I stood up. My mother reached for my hand. I stepped back. "No," I said softly. "Peace does not come from fixing you. It comes from letting you fall without me underneath." Then I left. The collapse of Hayes Dining did not happen overnight. That would have been cleaner. It happened the way neglected buildings collapse. First, small cracks, then warnings. Then one wall gives way and everyone pretends they did not hear it. Suppliers filed lawsuits. 2 locations closed. Then 4. Employees left when paychecks became uncertain. Local press began asking questions. Brandon was investigated for fraud and embezzlement. Tara filed for divorce and moved to Kansas City with their daughter. My parents sold the house with the stone columns and moved into a smaller place near the edge of town. People sent me articles, screenshots, sympathetic messages. I did not celebrate. Celebration would have implied I wanted destruction. I did not. I wanted freedom. There is a difference. The restaurants did not fail because I stopped helping. They failed because my help had been hiding the failure. When I removed myself, the truth finally had room to stand up. My own life expanded in the space their crisis used to occupy. That surprised me. I had not realized how much of my energy was reserved for incoming disaster. Before, every phone call from Tulsa tightened my chest. Every holiday invitation felt like a summons. Every success I had was followed by a guilty thought about whether I should send more money home. After the cutoff, the quiet felt illegal. Then it felt strange. Then it felt like oxygen. The $1 million design package allowed me to expand my firm. I opened a small New York studio, hired 2 senior designers, built a hospitality practice that became known for warm, sustainable luxury instead of wasteful spectacle. A magazine that had once called my work promising now called it defining. I framed that issue, not because I needed praise, because the girl who was told pretty colors were not real work deserved to see proof on the wall. I bought myself flowers every Friday for 6 months, not expensive ones, just enough color to remind me that beauty was not a weakness. It was the language I had built a life from. My mother tried to call once after the house sold. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was soft. "Susan, I do not know how things got this bad. I listened in my kitchen in Chicago. Snow was falling outside. For a second, I wanted to call back. Not because she had earned it, because grief sometimes wears your mother's voice. Then I replayed the message she had sent months earlier. Do not call or come here anymore. We are done. And do not even dream about the will, sweetheart. I did not call back. Not out of revenge. Out of memory. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will not require me to become available for harm again. That is a lesson I had to learn slowly. Some doors can be closed without being locked in anger. Some silences are not punishment. They are protection. And silence, when chosen, can be the highest form of freedom. A year after the message, I went back to Tulsa for a hotel project. Not for them, for work. The client site was only 6 blocks from the first Hayes diner. It was closed by then. The sign had faded. Paper covered the windows. Weeds grew near the entrance where my father once stood for newspaper photos. I stood across the street for a long time. I expected grief. Maybe satisfaction. Maybe rage. Instead, I felt the strange sadness of seeing a place finally become as empty outside as it had felt inside. A young woman walked past me and said, "Shame about that place. Used to be famous." I nodded. "Yes," I said, "it did." Then I walked away. No dramatic music. No final glance. No need for the building to apologize. Buildings do not apologize. Neither do some families. You simply learn to stop living inside them. The real aftermath did not look like a movie ending. It looked like small choices. Not answering a holiday message that began with guilt instead of apology. Not sending money when a supplier called because my father had given them my private number years earlier. Not rushing to solve a problem simply because I knew how. At first, every no felt like stepping off a cliff. Then I realized there was ground beneath me. My own ground. I started therapy that winter. I told the therapist I did not know whether I had been abused, because nobody had hit me and nobody had locked me in a room. She asked, "Did they make love conditional on your usefulness?" I could not answer. Not because I did not know. Because I did. I cried harder in that office than I had cried in years. Not pretty tears, not controlled tears. The kind that make your chest ache because your body is finally telling the truth. Your mouth protected everyone from. Therapy did not make me hate my family. It made me stop editing them into people they had never been. My father was not a hidden tender man trapped behind pride. I was a man who chose pride so often it became his personality. My mother was not neutral. She was safe inside his system and called that safety peace. Brandon was not unlucky. I was protected from consequences until consequences learned his address. And I was not cold. I was exhausted. That distinction saved me. The first Christmas I did not go home. I expected disaster. Instead, I woke late, made coffee, took a walk along the lake, ate dinner with friends who asked about my projects and did not once mention what I owed anyone. After dessert, one of them raised a glass and said, "To Susan, who finally stopped paying admission to be mistreated." We laughed. Then I cried a little. Because somewhere in Tulsa, my old family was probably calling me selfish. But in that room, selfish looked a lot like alive. People ask if I miss them. The honest answer is complicated. I do not miss being mocked. I do not miss bank transfers disguised as duty. I do not miss Brandon's laughter, my father's dismissal, or my mother's sweet little knives. But sometimes I miss the family I imagined. The one where my father saw my work and understood it was not decoration. The one where my mother protected me without needing a crisis first. The one where Brandon was a brother instead of a spoiled heir with empty pockets. I let myself miss that family. Then I remind myself they existed only in my hunger, not in my history. Healing did not mean pretending I never wanted them. Healing meant accepting that wanting them could not make them real. So I built other rooms. Rooms with friends who celebrate me without asking for a wire transfer. Rooms with colleagues who respect my work. Rooms where silence is comfortable because no one is using it to punish me. That is family now. Not blood. Respect. That was the victory no one could see from the outside. Not the contract, not the New York studio, not the headlines about Hayes dining. The victory was an ordinary Tuesday night when my phone rang. I saw a Tulsa number, and my body did not obey it. I let it ring. I kept cooking. I tasted the soup, added salt, and realized my hands were steady. For most people, that might sound small. For me, it was proof that the chain had finally broken. I had spent years mistaking urgency for love. Now I knew better. Love does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet kitchen, a locked bank account, a blocked number, and the peaceful knowledge that you are no longer available for people who only know how to need you. If my mother had not sent that message, I might have kept paying. That is the truth I do not like admitting. I might have kept calling, kept proving, kept translating neglect into stress and cruelty into family patterns. Sometimes freedom does not begin because you become brave. Sometimes it begins because someone finally says the quiet part so clearly that even your loyalty cannot disguise it. Do not call. Do not come. We are done. So I did not call. I did not come. And I let done mean done. They thought they were cutting me out of the will. They did not understand they were cutting me out of the role that had been killing me. The daughter who paid to be insulted. The sister who funded failure. The safety net stretched beneath people who called her weak. That woman is gone. In her place is a woman who knows the difference between love and access, between family and extraction, between peace and silence. The Hayes family fell apart when I stopped holding them up, but I did not destroy them. I simply stepped out from under the weight. And for the first time in my life, I stood upright. And I never mistook their need for my purpose again.